Hi guys, welcome back. Now, when we talk about our topics, we'll talk about React element, render function, component. What is functional component? Multiple component, props. Now, what is React element? React element is an object describing DOM node and its desired property. It contains information about the component type, example button, its property, example its color, and any child inside it. React element and DOM element are not same. React element are converted to DOM element using render function. If you remember in our first module, when we are typing any JSX element, we type something in return part. And when we return part was using, ideally what exactly happened, our normal React, normal HTML is returned back to the React as a form of JSX. So how exactly it work in a render function? Why in a render function? Basically, when we talk about the components, there are two main category of component. One is called as your functional component and one is called as your class-based component. So in the functional component, we don't have to have a render function, whereas in our class-based component, we'll have our render function. So given below is a syntax of writing a React element. Here we create the element to represent h1 DOM element using react.createElement. That's a bit old syntax. I'll show you the new way of writing that. Now let's see how exactly this render function work for us. So first of all, the very first render thing is we'll say rendering is a process of transforming your React component into DOM node that your browser can understand and display on the screen. Let me show by example. We'll go back to our demo part. So now we'll open our Visual Studio Code first of all, and we'll open our folder where we generated our React application. And we make few change there, like we make one h1 tag and then h2 tag. How exactly that h1 h2 is binded to the HTML? So let's see that first. So there come your render function. We have one node module by the name of React DOM. React DOM has a capability to render it. How it look like? See, this is a component that you create by the name of app. Now, here's the one index file. If you remember, I told the starting point of the application is index file. Now, how exactly it work? So for working it, there's one library called React DOM. React DOM has method called render. In this render, you render your app where in the root, what is that root? Root is one div. If I go to public folder in index.html, we have one div called root. All the content that you want to render will be a part of this called root. So we make our React component and we converted that into a DOM using your React DOM.render and that DOM element binded in the index file. Let's run this application. So to run that application, you should go into your command prompt cmd. Although you can run the application through Visual Studio Code also, I don't prefer that. Basically, we already have very small screen of VS Code to write a code. And if we spend a more say space on particularly your terminal also, it's gonna be difficult to manage that. We'll go back to desktop. There we have our web app and we'll say here dir to see what all files are there. Here we type npm start. I'll show you one thing. Let's see there. Now, when it start compiling, it load on the page, say one localhost 3000. Now, what it load, let's see what a DOM structure look like on the page side. As of now, we have one main div called root, and then inside that we are loading our own div called h1 and h2. Let's see that. If I just do right click, inspect, in that inspect part, if I go to the element, see we have body have div called root, and in this root basically all my content got loaded. So this is what we are saying, that your React component converted to the JSX or a DOM by your render. So render is a package used to access DOM in order to render React element in the browser, the one I just showed you. Here element to be display and HTML element where you want to display. Before React 16, it was not possible to have multiple render element. Now I can render the multiple element at one place. These are new React which do the things. So guys, the one we created is our basically called as a component. Now let's read more about that. Components are the independent and the reusable bit of a code which return React element that describe how the section of UI or user interface should appear. Every part of React application is a component which split the UI into two independent reusable sections. Each independent section is processed separately. We can easily update or change any component of the application without disturbing a the rest of the application. Suppose I have a proper one application that have a header, a display part, search box, footer. So what I can do, I can divide them into small components and I'll only make a change in the particular component which I want to change. No need to make change in every single complete application if you want. You can make a change in a small portion of your particular component, and that's the best part of your component based structure. Component must be written in the uppercase to avoid ambiguity with the HTML tag one component. Let's take example. Suppose I have one more component there. Generally we follow a plan that we make one folder by the name of component. In that component, suppose I make one component by the name of header.js. I return one header, or we wrap them in one div. In that div, I have one header, saying this way. Now, this header is basically having one center tag. In this center tag, we'll say Edureka React, and we can put in some h2 tag more or less because it should look good. After this header tag, I'll put one HR tag like a horizontal line. Now, the very first component we make, every component you export like this: export default header. Now, how to render it? You cannot have a React DOM.render at every component. We can do one thing. In the app.js, I can import it. I'll say import header from dot slash component slash header. And this particular header, I'll put under this div like this. Now we nest one component inside the other component. If I go back to my browser, we see one header, under that our content. We'll change this. We'll say first component, something like that. Just to differentiate, I'll say first component like this. Now if I go back, see it says a first component and then we get that header. Now one thing, if you see, we have one div root, in that one more div, in that we have again one div that have the header, that has header. See, unnecessary we have two divs which can avoid. How? React give us one thing called fragment. We'll select this react.fragment. Why we need this? Basically, what the use of outer div? The main use of the div is that we must have a wrapper element, and that wrapper element can be your react.fragment also. When your react.fragment is fine, or other option is just write fragment here, and I write here fragment. If you write a fragment, you need to import that. If you just write a react.fragment, do not import that. Both the ways are fine. Either simplet fragment or write react.fragment. Now if you go back to our browser, everything remains same. But the best part is in your div, you just have header and your rest of the thing. So unnecessary div got removed. And one more point we were discussing, that a component name start with a capital letter. It's possible that you export by some name, import by some other name, but it's recommended export by same name and import by same name. Now suppose in here I'll import it by small letter H. Now what the problem in that case? What the React show? Let's see. React don't show the header. Why? Because now React don't know, are you talking about the HTML tag or it's a component? Because the point is like that, your normal HTML component also have a header, and that starts with a small letter, whereas the React component should start with a capital letter like this. So this will define that how exactly you should proceed. Now it started capital letter and will go like that. Now if I go, it will work. So this was the point, that it should start with a capital letter. Now, next thing, there are two ways to define a component: class based or a function based. What is a class based component? A class component is defined using a class. It is written with the extend keyword react.component statement. This is a statement inherit react.component and give your access to React component functionality. The component divided into two sections. Let me explain you those things as well. We have one thing called a class-based component called functional component. How we divide them, in my extra file, I explain you this thing. I'll make one extra file here, or I'll add one readme file here. I delete the things which are in readme file and explain the thing here. We have one class base and a functional component. Although we have hooks component also, going forward, we're going to talk about that. In a class-based component are basically called as a logical component and a functional component called a dumb component. Your class-based component are heavy as compared to your functional. They are light in weight. They can manage the state. They cannot manage the state. What is state? In the upcoming part of this section, I'm going to talk about state. Cannot maintain state. So basically all your logic, suppose I have to call the API or I have to do some manipulations or some logical thing which I have to do. All your logics should be written in a class-based component, and the data from a class base we pass to the functional component that will display. So that is how we divide our application. In a class-based component, we write a logics, and a functional component, we display that logic, display the data that we got in return. So that's how we divide into two parts, and that's what it's saying. It say that basically a component, when we create through a class, the syntax is also a bit different. Now, the way to write a two component, you say simple import React and component, either like do this way or say React.component. Both are fine to use. You can go with any way you want. Now, let me make one component a class-based component. We'll go back. Let's convert this header into class base. How? Now you need to import one more thing that is called as component. How you change it? Okay, let me just write it down. I'll right click class header extends component like this. In this, they have one render part, render. In this render, we'll have return, because class cannot directly return something. Class need a method to return. Now I'll take this thing and that I'll return from this class like this. And at the end, I'll just comment out this piece of a code. Going forward, if you want to check how we did this, you can get from there. And ultimately, all the code which I'm doing, I'm going to share you through the end through my GitHub profile. Now, if we check our browser, everything work exactly same. We don't even know it's a class based or a functional, but ultimately we have converted our component into the class based component like this. Let's go back. Now, class-based component can maintain the state. Basically, to maintain the state, what is state? We'll talk about that, don't worry. To maintain the state, we have to use a constructor because it's more like a local variable. Now, to declare any variable inside your class, you need a constructor. And the constructor, guys, is always the first thing that get called inside the class. Means whatever programming language you pick, whether it be your Java, Python, or Node or JavaScript, constructor is always the first thing that get called inside the class, and all the declarations we do inside the constructor. So constructor is a member function of a class within initializing object of a class. It is same name as the class itself, but here we don't have to give the name of that. It call automatically during the creation of an object from a class. Basically, constructor generally when talk about the Java, in Java it automatically create, but here we will implicitly create that. When implementing the constructor of a React, you should use a super keyword. Why to the super keyword? To inherit the property from a parent element. No, we need a super keyword. And super method is used to call the constructor of a parent class. If your application code does not contain a state or prop within a component, it is not a binding any event handler. No need of define a component with constructor. As in our case, we don't have any state, nothing. We have not declared any component. Going forward, when we have to maintain the state, we'll go with that. How we do that? Basically, we write a constructor here. Now, suppose I just write a constructor like this. Now, let's see what happened. We go back to our, it give me the error that must call the super. With constructor, you must have a super like this. And in that super, you can declare the state. How? State is more or less like a local variable. We'll say like this. This dot state, and state a variable. Suppose I write state variable as title and we assign some value to that. Suppose Edureka React. Now how to bind that? Basically, to bind that here, what you will do is remove it, put a curly braces, say this dot state dot title. This is how you bind a state. Now if you go back to browser, it will look similar, but now it's having a state. State is act like a local variable. We'll talk about that in more detail. So guys, in this first part of a second module, we understand what is a render function, how to create a class-based component, what the constructor do, and how to declare a state and how to bind that, plus how to nest one component into other component, and how we can get rid of div using our fragment. Now we are going to talk about functional component. Although we already declared a functional component and usually JavaScript functions, we stick the prop and return the element. We have already seen how to write a functional component. So you can write a functional component in this way, like a normal function, or you can make a functional component in other way around. Like, okay, I'll make one more component, say footer.js. As I write a normal function like this is a one function. Other way of writing that function is import React from React. Then we'll say const footer bracket arrow curly braces return, and I'll pass here say one react.fragment will use. Again, in this react.fragment, what I'll do is I'll give one hr tag like a horizontal line, and under that I'll take a one center tag again. In that I'll take a one h3 tag, and I will copyright symbol ampersand copy and write Edureka. At the end, export that. Export default footer. Take this, go back to your app, import this. See, one we write as a normal function, one we use a arrow function of ES6 dot slash component slash footer. Both ways are correct. You can go with any way, like as an arrow function or as a normal function. Inside the component, we have to look for the footer. And there, I'll take this footer tag like this way. We should indent our code also if we can, although it's not required here because it's the same level only, but it's fine. We'll go back. Now see guys, we'll see a copyright symbol. So you can write a functional component like this way, or you can write a functional component by this way. Multiple component, we've already seen that when we have more than one component, we make a folder by the name of component, and in that we can add a multiple component. We make a one app, and then we make one footer and header. And generally we prefer that a test case will take later on, so we can delete this. Logo we don't require, although we're not managing any caching, so I can remove the few things right now. Later on when we require them, we'll bring them up, because our application should look more cleaner, and when you are practicing that code, you know what exactly it is. So what I'll do is I'll make a repo, and in that repo I'll basically divide that into module wise. Although from first module we don't have anything, now from module 2, what I'm going to do is on the GitHub, I'll just log into the GitHub, and over that GitHub module wise I'll push this code. So I recommend all of you to follow this repo for the code, and over this repo you will get all the code of the section we are performing here. So now let me sign in there. I got a mail because I'm using a cloud altogether. In this particularly, this is the repo by the name of Akash Developer. So just follow this repo, Akash Developer. Here I'm making a new repo by the name of React Learning, and module wise we'll push the code. So this is actually the one we are doing is should fall under your module 2. So module 2 could have a lot of things. So what we'll do is we'll just name this folder as module 2. How exactly I'm going to divide is I'm going to make one folder, say app React, basically we'll say. I'll move this web app in this folder. Ideally it's running, so we'll stop this once and we'll try to move it here. Okay, I think it's in open a Visual Studio Code also. We'll close from here also, and then I'll push it. As I said that all the thing I'm gonna push module wise, you can get all the code from here. Now we'll go back, we'll open our VS Code. So we understand that, and we'll run this code also once again. Now we understand that how exactly it works. Now the main topic in the functional component that we should learn is props. So I'm on desktop, we have web app, and we'll start this. So now the next thing is functional versus class. Functional components are simple to read, understand, and are right in few lines of a code. Whereas class component are more featured, this make code little bulky and as compared to functional component. They are access props, they can access prop, but they have lack of state. So they don't have a life cycles and they cannot have a state. They are the container component. They access prop, handle state and life cycle. Due to lack of state, functional component are stateless and they are stateful component. They do not need this keyword to access the prop. They use a this keyword to access the prop. How exactly prop work? What is prop? Prop are the argument passed to React component. Prop are usually passed via HTML attribute to the component. They are used by both class func and functional both. They are used to render the data from parent to child component. Hence, flow for data in React is unidirectional from parent to child. Props are immutable. That is there, we cannot change. So prop with class-based component. We can access the prop by the name of this dot prop name or this dot prop. This is the global object store all the prop of component, and prop of a functional component. To access the prop of a function, we don't use the this keyword, and functional component accept a prop as parameter and can be accessed directly. Let me show you how exactly we can pass a one prop from one component to other component and how exactly we can receive that. So let's go back. This is my parent component. There's nothing called parent child. How exactly we design that component, it make it parent or child. Now, if I have to pass any prop, okay, just take example. If we have a tag, A have href. What is that href? Href is a property of anchor tag. Similarly, suppose I have a img. IMG have SRC. What is the SRC? SRC is a property of the IMG tag. So ultimately, similarly, the component that we have called, we can pass the any property to that. I'll say first of all, data header, any name to property. I'll say data header equal to say Edureka React app like that. Now this data I'm sending to my class component. Similarly, suppose I'll send one year to basically functional component like this. So you can send the prop like this. Now how exactly they're gonna receive? Basically a functional component can directly receive the prop. Suppose here I want to bind this. So this will receive the prop as a parameter there, props. Now we can simply say Edureka props dot in the curly braces bind it. Say props dot year. In this particularly we get that we are passing a data from app to footer, and how you will receive here will say props in the constructor props, and to access that prop, suppose I'll take one minor tag below this. Suppose I take one h5 tag. In this I bind a prop. This dot props dot prop name. What is a prop name? The prop name here is data header. I'll change some sentence here. I'll say React is used for SPA. Now data header, go back to header in the prop dot data header like this. Now if I go back to my, I hope it's running. Let's check that. Oh, it's not started. Let's see why. It's not able to find the index file. Is it? Okay, let's verify why. Yeah, I don't see the index file. I think by mistakenly we deleted that index file. Just let's put that back, because if there's no index file, it's not able to run. Just verify. Yes, we deleted that. We'll restore it. Now again, we try to run the application. Make sure your index file must be there. So now I restore that. Now let's check. See guys, we get 2020 and we get React is used for SPA. Both the data are actually coming from the parent and we receive them as a prop. This is how you send a prop from parent to child. So prop are useful when a component receive a data from parent component, which should be used in case of receive data from some API. Suppose I call the API. API calling we do in a class-based component, and the data we pass as a prop to the functional component. Now, basically, when you call the API, no, you have to save the data somewhere first of all before passing. Where we save that data in the state. Thank you.